Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Joe and Kat Chats. Today we're talking about schools, education, and COVID-19, what that means. We've got lots to discuss, so hopefully Joe will hop on real quick here and we can get started because it's going to be a jam-packed hour, I think. We've got a lot that we want to just do like a quick overview about, and then we've also got some pretty interesting perspective stuff that we have sort of discussed before today's chat, so hopefully we can give some pretty good recommendations, because as most of our topics that we cover, school is not really going as well as it could be going. So it's another institution that we can completely dismantle. Add it to the list of things that we've already discussed. Because there's a lot to dismantle and rebuild in this world right now. And hopefully these chats have been, enlightening in the sense that we try our hardest to provide people with lots of great information, because we do it for you all. Truly. Hello.
Catherine, hello, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Oh, let me tell you, I'm outdoors. You know, I'm a rugged outdoorsman. I like being outside. I'm outside with it. I'm by a cafe. I'm sitting in an open area, and I like the space that I have. It's good. It's real good. How are you?
Nice. It looks beautiful.
Let me tell you, and the food that's on the way in about the next, 7 or 8 minutes will be even better, but I'm not going to eat in front of everybody because I have class, I have manners, I have a way about myself that exudes a certain je ne sais quoi. So I'm not going to go ahead and munch on a black bean burger and sweet potato fries with some hot sauce on the side. I'm not going to do that to everybody.
Oh, well, I really hope you will enjoy that after.
I certainly will. I absolutely will. And it's going to have to be a quick eat because I've got to take Parker to gymnastics practice after that. So we are on the move today.
Yeah,
on the move.
You got a jam-packed day. You spoke about it in your stories already. So.
Oh my goodness, it's been bananas. It's been bananas, and it's only going to be crazier because you and I, Miss Wells, have a lot to talk about. You got a whole bunch to talk about. We got a lot to talk about. People are excited about the video earlier today when I talked about all these different topics, like teaching kids how to personal hygiene and being able to manage their emotions at a young age, and all of that other stuff. And we're going to talk about all of that stuff because that stuff's important. That stuff's important. That stuff matters. That stuff is just as important as reading, writing, and arithmetic, the 3 quote-unquote R's that we were taught in school when we were little kids.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my goodness. Yeah, all of that's so important. And I think that the emphasis that we want to make today is just that we need to challenge the ways that in which we, approach school, because it is outdated, my friend.
Way outdated. I mean, 100 years ago, we didn't have cell phones. You and I couldn't communicate like this. 100 years ago, cars were barely in existence. 100 years ago, airplanes had just come about, coincidentally, in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, I think in 1919, if I'm not mistaken. So a lot has changed in the 100 years, but the way we go about teaching and education and school and learning has not really changed at all. It hasn't changed at all. And just as you would, for example, update your wardrobe or upgrade the software on your phone or on your computer, I certainly think that the way we learn is due for an upgrade. We're due for teaching 3.0 or 4.0 or 29.0, whatever it is. We're due for something new. We need something fresh. And the next, 53 minutes or so is going to be an attempt to give everybody the freshness they want and need.
Amazing. I'm excited.
I am also.
Let's get going.
Let's get into it.
yeah, like what do you want to, I guess, start with, which I guess we should just go with the old standby of defining these terms. What are we even talking about? What is school?
What is school? School is a place where you teach and a place where you learn. I'm going to say that again, just to make sure everybody heard it the second time around. School is an institution. It's a place where you go to be taught, and you go to learn. Okay? And it's a place where learning happens, and typically the understanding of school is for somebody that is 18 years of age or under, because when you go out of high school, you go to college, and college isn't necessarily called school. It's called a university, which has its own set of definitions and connotations that are part of that word. So what we're talking today specifically is our youngsters, our kindergartners to our 12th graders, our I guess our 4-year-olds to our 18-year-olds. That's what we're looking for. That's what we're talking to. Now, the word school, it actually comes from a Greek word meaning leisure, which, and when you think about one of the aspects of school is studying, and one of the aspects of studying is doing homework. And part of doing homework, it's a compound word meaning home and work. You're doing work at home. And work is, work in my opinion, and I'm sure the opinion of Noah Webster and anybody else who's ever written a dictionary, would say that, wait a minute, work isn't supposed to be leisurely activity. It's not supposed to be fun. And wait a minute, homework, we're doing work from home? This is supposed to be done in school, because this is why I go to these institutions. I go to these institutions to learn and to be taught. I don't do this stuff at home. Why am I doing this at home? So again, even the word school, once I start talking about it and trying to deconstruct the very definition of it, even that word seems somewhat inadequate for what actually needs to be done in terms of educating youngsters, people 18 years of age or younger.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting, because when you explain that, it kind of makes me think about some of the stuff we're going to get into a little bit later, which is like, what do you want to learn? Because you don't get a choice when you're in school right now. And I
No, you
think that
don't.
there is an aspect of this that we're going to recommend later,
Yes,
where
ma'am.
kids should be able to choose and decide for themselves. It shouldn't just
Exactly.
be cut and dry, quote unquote, facts about
Mm-hmm.
whatever, arithmetic, like you said,
Exactly.
history facts, and all the things. Reading's
Mm-hmm.
important, but
Oh, sure it is.
kids should be able to choose what they read.
Exactly. And I think kids should be taught how to read, which is another one of these things that we're going to talk about later on in this conversation. Now, what's the school's purpose? What do you do at school? Now, the Association for Supervision and Curriculum Development defines a school's purpose as to provide for the fullest possible development for a learner for living morally, creatively, and productively in a democratic society. And I love that definition, because wait a minute, we're supposed to be in a democratic society. We're supposed to be able to be free to do what we want, when we want, with whomever we would like to do it with by choice, and however long we want to do it. So the whole idea of school is, hey, you, student, have to learn these particular subjects in order to have a certain level of freedom. If you do not learn these particular subjects, then your freedoms will be restricted in some form or fashion, by way of some institution that dictates that your freedom be restricted because you did not learn these particular subjects. That very concept is total horseshit.
I
It
was
really
just going to
honestly
say
is.
that. Honestly, okay, so we usually prepare like a really brief outline for these, but we don't necessarily prepare much for these. And so this morning
No.
I was kind of reading up on school and education, and
Mm-hmm.
that is actually completely the opposite of what I sort of did in my research this morning, when I kind of went on a historical rabbit hole.
Yep.
And I sort of picked out these, well, there's three main sort of reasons why schools were established, and then I added a fourth one for the
Okay.
Canadian context. So the
Okay, I'm
first
curious.
one,
Tell me about them.
yeah, so the first one is basically it came out of educating the upper class, which perpetuates classism, which we can talk about after. But
We absolutely
the
will.
reading, writing, and arithmetic was
Hmm.
taught as an elementary school to promote orderly political behavior. And so that's like what it
Hmm.
came out of. And this was
Hmm.
in 19th century Europe.
Yes.
So, yeah, so that in and of itself, like who is even involved in the political behavior? It's all classist, it's all racist, it's all wrapped up in
Hmm.
sort of this ideology that they outline as sort of the orderly political behavior. They want people to be able to read
Yes.
and write and do arithmetic
Hmm.
in order to vote. And back then, there were issues with who could vote and who had access
Exactly.
to those
Exactly.
things.
And
Yeah.
back then, voting actually meant something because
Mm-hmm.
you also had the political capital that was attached to your vote. So you could vote for something, and then, hey, you know what? I'm going to vote, and now I know my vote will actually mean something for the rights and freedoms that I actually cast my ballot for.
Mm-hmm.
Voting now, people who fight to vote now, it's a somewhat of an exercise in futility because yeah, sure, you now you have the right to vote, but what are you actually voting for, and who are you voting for to make sure that your rights actually get enforced?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
So,
it's interesting. Now, another part of this whole conversation, another word that we talked about is education. What is education? Because people think that education and school are they're joined at the hip, but they're not the same. Education is the process for facilitating learning. It's hey, you know what? I'm going to learn something. And there's a quote that I saw, let's say towards the late part of last week, that I wrote down, and I want to read this to everybody to make sure everybody encapsulates this. It's by a scientist named Dr. Arthur Fauché, and it's from the Curriculum Matrix, where he says, the one continuing purpose of education since ancient times has been to bring people to as full a realization as possible of what it is to be a human being. Remember those last two words, of what it is to be a human being. Other statements of educational purpose have also been widely accepted: to develop the intellect, to serve social needs, to contribute to the economy, to create an effective workforce, to prepare students for a job or a career, or to promote a particular social or political system. Hmm. These
wow.
purposes offered are undesirably limited in scope, and in some instances they conflict with the broad purpose I have indicated. They imply a distorted human existence. The broader humanistic purpose includes all of them and goes beyond them, for it seeks to encompass all the dimensions of the human experience. That, I, from my lips to God's ears and everybody watching on Instagram right now, that's exactly, that encapsulates everything. That is perfect. Because what Dr. Fauché is saying is, hey, you know what? Learning a particular subject is more than just being able to get a job or contribute to the economy or having some sort of intellect or
Mm-hmm.
or or being smart. Dr. Cornell West years ago in a speech said, "Hey, don't be the smartest person in the room. Be wise. Make the phones can be smart. You make sure you're wise." Or to promote a political system or social system. Remember our conversations when we talked about Karens and how Karens are kind of factory made, and you've seen one, you've seen them all, and they get indoctrinated from particular schools. They go to the same institutions. Their parents belong to the same social clubs. The Karens participate in the same kind of sports, whether it's women's lacrosse or field hockey. It's all the same stuff over and over and over again that creates this same cyclical process of churning out the same sort of people over and over and over again. And what he's saying is, you know what? We got to be better humans than just being able to learn a couple of subjects and being able to get a job and being able to have a particular career or being able to be a part of society or be a part of a workforce. You know what? There's more to this than just being hey, being a good student. I mean, earlier today, I posted on Instagram, I was like, hey, I found my 2 master's degrees. But you know what? There's more to me than just having 2 master's degrees. Just like there is more to you than you having a master's degree in sociology from, I forget which university, Kathy.
York.
You're from York University. There's more to all of us than just whatever diploma or degree we have sitting in a storage unit or on our walls in our offices or underneath our beds. There's more to us than that. And this goes to the bigger part of our conversation that we're going to have later today, is we're going to try to figure out how to be more than just what our education says we are.
Yeah, I love that. I love how you provided that quote and then broke it down so eloquently. Thank you so much. And yeah, I think that, I mean, we as a society, informed by sort of Europe, European, so because that's the system we implemented for schools. We took like a little piece of that and just went with it. And I just wanted to sort of outline these historical things before we move on too, because
Please do.
I think it's important in the sense that that it just demonstrates how we literally took like one tiny little piece of that quote and just were like, this is good enough. Because the first one, I mean, the purpose of school was to educate the upper classes. And then after the French Revolution, there was a movement to separate church and state. Yes. And so the schools were established to break the hold of the Catholic Church in France and promote secularism, which we also adopted here for the most part. There's still like establishments of Catholic schools and school boards, etc. in North America. But I think that was an important sort of piece of it. And then the third one, which I think is just the most obvious when you know about it, but I had to sort of have an aha moment. And it's designed to create future factory workers. That's what school is about. Industrialization caused a need for universal schooling so that factory workers would become, or we could educate our children to become docile, agreeable, and punctual factory workers. Because if you're starting kids young in the process of alienation, and I say that in the Marxist sense of the word alienation, it provides a worldview that is less likely to challenge the system. So I think that's a pretty impactful one, because I thoroughly agree with you. We're doing these chats and always encouraging folks to challenge the system, but we weren't taught how to do that.
No, we weren't. We weren't. And we weren't taught to do that on purpose because the last thing a business owner wants is free-thinking people. Yeah. The last thing a business owner wants is someone who is willing to quote-unquote buck the system. The last thing a business owner wants is somebody who is recalcitrant or a rabble-rouser or someone who's willing to upset the apple cart, so to speak. That's the last thing anybody wants. What you want as an employer is someone who's just smart enough to do what they're being told without understanding why they're doing what they're doing. And the whole purpose we're having all of these conversations is to question more, is to not just ask who, what, where, and when, but the most important question is to ask why. Why am I doing this? Why is white supremacy the way it is? Why are there food deserts? Why is there unequal housing? Why are there Karens? Why? Absolutely. Yeah, because when we get to why, that's when we learn some stuff.
Yeah, it's a way to develop sort of critical thinking skills, is just asking why and then reflecting upon the answer you're getting and deciding whether that rings true for you or not. And that's a really important part of critical thinking, is not only asking, but then reflecting upon the answer and figuring out why things might not be the way they should be. Exactly.
And you know, it's so ironic that you talked about all this now, because we talked about education, we talked about school, but what do you do when you go to school? You go to school to learn. You go to school to learn. What is learning? Learning is gaining new what's called KSOCs. And I'm sure some of you might have heard this acronym. I know this acronym because you deal with this when you go to fill out jobs and fill out resumes and applications. They talk about KSOCs. KSOCs being knowledge, skills, abilities, and other characteristics. That's what you do when you go to school. And some of these other characteristics include your values, your belief systems, your habits. That's what you do when you go to learn. Now, learning is also, it's this transformative process that takes place where you take what you've learned through school and other institutions, formally, informally, and non-formally. You add experience to what you've learned, and that learning transforms you as a human being. It changes the way you behave. It changes the way you think. It changes the way you act. It changes the course of your life. There's an old saying, information changes situations. And information, that new knowledge, comes from learning. So learning, it's the process of acquiring new skills, knowledge, abilities, and other characteristics. There's so many of these acronyms that I have in my mind and you forget them sometimes. Skills, knowledge, skills, abilities, and other characteristics.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
So just make sure that we remember that when we go to school and what this is all about. Now, learning, again, it takes place informally, formally, and non-formally. There's a bunch of different ways people learn. People have learning disabilities that are able to learn. People learn experientially. They're like, hey, you know what? I like experiencing what I learn. People are visual learners. Hey, I got to see it so I can learn it. Some people like to read what they need to learn and then demonstrate. So there's a bunch of different ways people learn. And again, I think this is going to be part of the problem that we're going to discuss next with regards to COVID-19 and how we're going to be learning now as future students, because so much of what we're trying to learn now and so much of what we need to learn comes from a place of being with a particular person. It comes from a place. It comes from when you're in school. It comes from having a relationship with your teacher. My ex-wife is a former middle school teacher and middle school principal and worked in administration of Baltimore City Public Schools for a bunch of years. And I had a conversation with her about this particular topic. And she said to me, she said, Joe, the best teachers understand how to read the room. They understand body language. They understand when a student has actually learned the subject matter that the teacher is trying to teach that particular student. I don't know how you interpret body language when the classroom is Zoom, when
Exactly.
You're not physically there with the student.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how to overcome that. I don't know how to resolve that issue. And that's going to be a problem because, again, when you mix in the racial wealth gap and wealth inequality to all of this, you're going to have the same situations that pervade our society now. They're going to be pervasive again with regards to education. People who have money are going to be able to throw money at the problem to fix their problem. So if you're rich, you're going to be able to get a tutor and have the tutor come to your house, socially distanced, and say, hey, you know what? Yeah, I'll help Blake with his algebra.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'll help Marissa with her Spanish. This is just going to happen. So while that happens, Lakeisha and Jamal in the inner city, they're not going to get the same opportunities because they live in the city and they don't have access to broadband internet and they don't have access to technology. Mm-hmm. And they might be living in a particular area that isn't as well funded taxpayer-wise, so they don't have the financial resources from a local governmental perspective to buy their students technology or to provide their students with broadband internet access or a place where they can go to get broadband internet access.
Exactly.
So I'm worried.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm not only worried, I'm concerned.
Hmm. Yeah, me too. Yeah, I mean, all of this is so important and timely right now because COVID has created, like, intensified the social inequalities that we were already facing. And
Absolutely.
school is no different than that. I think that that's like, uh, you know, it's becoming more and more obvious for folks that relied on school for to feed their children in the day. It's becoming more obvious who, has access to those things, like having high speed internet and having a computer at home at all. Because I read something this morning, indigenous folks, or indigenous students are least likely to have high speed
Okay, yeah,
internet,
I think something
and
happened with that. I'm
black
so sorry.
students
I'm gonna
are
check on that and have that out shortly.
least likely to have a computer at home. So these folks probably relying on libraries, and libraries are shutting down at a really, really rapid rate,
And they're closed
both
because of
in
COVID-19
cities.
now.
Yeah, and yeah, so there's not as many in general, and I bet you COVID will contribute to shutting down more and more of these public community locations.
It's a mess. It's a mess. And
Mm-hmm.
when you have money, you're less likely to have COVID-19. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Because you probably have access to health insurance and health care. You probably live in an area where you're more likely to social distance, which further lessens the effects of having COVID-19. You're more likely to live in a space, house-wise or apartment-wise, where you can have your own dedicated space for learning, whether it's a room, a space in the den, a space in a classroom, in a room in your house. You're more likely to have food security. So you're not necessarily relying on school to feed yourself. You can go to the kitchen, you can get a piece of toast, a piece of bread, you can get some avocado, you can make a piece of avocado toast in the morning, you can get a smoothie,
Mm-hmm.
and you go about your business. You can eat something. If you're in a place where you don't have those resources, you're now not only fighting to learn, but you're fighting hunger. And there's loads of studies that show that kids who don't have food security are less likely to learn. Their test scores are lower. They're less likely to graduate from high school, go to college, etc., etc. It is a cyclical process. So again, so much of the conversations that we keep talking about and the solutions that I keep having involve government resources, making government responsible for solving a lot of these problems, because we can't expect nonprofits to do this stuff. And we damn sure can't expect the corporate sector to do these things, because corporations are the reasons, in many instances, that these inequalities exist in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have a couple of things to say about that. The first thing
Please do.
is, oh my goodness. The first thing is, so this pandemic has
Excuse me.
demonstrated who essential workers are. And
Yes.
it's pretty blatantly obvious that essential workers are not paid as well as other people. So in the
Yep.
vein of what you were speaking about before, like who has access to this stuff, it's people who probably are not essential workers, who are low paid wage workers. So the parents of
Mhm.
these children might not have the ability to stay home and make sure that their kids are doing their school, or have access to their school to learn online through Zoom or
Right.
whatever else.
Exactly.
Um, and so it's just like another way that this is perpetuated, in where we've devalued these essential workers so much that, like, it's just contributing to this being such a social issue, that, like, more than just a health issue.
Correct.
Yeah, so, and the other thing is, I yeah, the government is absolutely someone, or an entity that needs to be taking care of its people. I recently listened to a talk where I don't know how I hadn't thought about this critically before, but basically the person was saying, like, we pay taxes. There's like a pool of resources that we have as a country, that we pay taxes for. And like, you know, traditionally, the way we think about government is they should be taking care of infrastructure. They should be taking care of things like institutions like schooling. In Canada, they take care of things like healthcare. Um,
Yes,
but
they do.
those resources, like, why can't we stop doing all the things that we don't agree with, like buying pipelines, for example, or causing war in in the instance
And
of both of our countries.
correct.
So it just made me think about like all of the things that we could do with taxpayer money that we're not doing. We're funding police, and these police budgets are so inflated. We've talked about this before. Like
Yes.
how are we not holding our officials accountable right now? And
Hmm.
these demands that we're making are just to reallocate resources into places that are actually going to help people live and have their basic needs met, which includes education.
Absolutely. Which includes education. It includes healthcare. It includes infrastructure. It includes high-speed rail. It includes green energy. It's all of these things that we keep talking about that it's there's an old axiom where government and intelligence are not supposed to be in the same sentence. And we're seeing more and more of that every day in your country and in my country because the United States has no idea what it's doing, and Canada, quite honestly, is not that far behind in its
No.
negligence and malfeasance.
Yeah.
They're, in other words, both countries are fucking up, and both countries should be doing better because we've got a lot of really smart people in both countries, and we've got a lot of really good people in both countries that really want to do the right thing. But our governments are beholden to corporate interests, and our corporate interests are directing what is actually needed to take place, especially when it comes to education and basically training people how to work instead of training people how to live and training people how to be better humans and human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really the next part of what we really want to talk about is, more often than not, we've been taught, hey, you need to learn how to read. You need to learn 18th century Canadian history. You need to know who Leonard Pelletier was, or John MacDonald, or Pierre Trudeau, or Viola Desmond,
Mm-hmm.
or Terry Fox. You need to know who these people are. And in the United States, you need to know who George Washington was, or Franklin Roosevelt, or Martin Luther King, or Malcolm X. John Wilkes Booth. Okay, all right, fine. We need to know all that. Great.
Yeah.
But there's other stuff that we should learn in school because again, school is a place of learning and teaching, and it comes from a Greek word meaning leisure, meaning learning. School is supposed to be a place where leisure, you're laid back, but you're enjoying what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And in many instances, people don't enjoy going to school. And I think part of that is because of the subject matter that is being presented to the students in schools. There's some students who, I know one of my professors years ago when I was in graduate school mentioned this concept to all of us in an the class was called Applied Interpreting Studies. And she said, hey, the concept of cerebral lateralization is important. And I was, okay, cerebral lateralization. And she said, yes, left brain, right brain. Cerebral lateralization. Left brain logical, right side artistic. There are some people who are just more left-brained. They're good at math. There are some people who are more right-brained. They're good at art. But there are some people who have both hemispheres or both lateralizations or both sides of their brain that are able to work in concert to understand, yeah, I can draw, but I can also do calculus. Okay, but not everybody wants to do calculus for the rest of their lives. But not everybody wants to learn how to play an oboe for the next 65 years of their existence. Some people just want to learn how to do things that will make them better human beings to be part of what's called a functioning democracy. We talked about that in the Association of Supervision for Curriculum and Development to become more productive in a democratic society. So how do we do that? What are some of the suggestions that we want to offer everybody? Because so much of what we talk about, Kat, is, hey, you know what? Yeah, white supremacy, racism, it's bullshit. But you know what? We want to come up with some offerings of some suggestions so everybody can go ahead and think about this stuff. So, for example, if you're a teacher, maybe you can adjust your curriculum. Maybe you could bring this up at a local school board meeting and say, hey, you know what? We're teaching these fifth graders, how to dissect a frog. But you know what? For what? Let's teach them something that's real. Let's teach them something that's actually useful. Okay? So, thank you very much. That's no big deal. Thank you. So, let's teach students how to effectively communicate, orally and written. Let's teach them how to listen. Let's teach them how to learn. Let's teach them how to read a book. How to read a book. There's actually a wonderful book. It's not in this box of books that I have here. It's in another box somewhere in my storage unit. The name of the book is called How to Read a Book. And it's by a gentleman named Mortimer Adler. It's a relatively older book, but it's a wonderful book that teaches people how to actually read a book. How to think for yourself, how to be self-aware, how to think critically, how to follow your heart, how to accept responsibility, how to apologize. You know what? Hey, you know what? I fucked up. I'm sorry. How can I fix this? My uncle told me this years ago. He said, Joe, if you mess up, fess up.
Mm-hmm.
If you mess up, fess up. And some people don't know how to say they're sorry. And that, not being able to say you're sorry ruins relationships. Mm-hmm. And it's this very sort of relationship that we're talking about now that's going to be a problem when we do distance learning, because the teacher-student dynamic, that paradigm, is a relationship. It is a relationship. And when you can't be next to that student or in the same space as the student to read that student's body language to make sure that he or she is understanding what is being taught, that erodes the relationship between the student and the teacher.
Yes, absolutely. Oh my gosh, that's like such a good point. And that's exactly why in-person teaching is so important. So important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just like any other, it's like being in a long distance relationship. It's cool to see your significant other every once in a while and have conversations on Facebook that last 2 hours or 3 hours long. That's all well and good. Or FaceTime them or message them on Instagram. That's all well and good. But eventually you got to be next to that person. You got to be with that person. You got to read their body language. You got to know what they want, what they're about when you're next to them. And that's important also. You have to learn how to apologize. So that's something that people don't know how to do. Students aren't necessarily understanding how to be curious, whether it's intellectually or academically or creatively. Mm-hmm. Students don't know or aren't taught how to be intrinsically motivated and intrinsically inspired to do something that says, hey, you know what? I want to do something that's bigger than me. I want to do something that's more important than sitting in this classroom and learning that stuff I don't want to learn. What's out here? Students should know how to do their taxes. That's not something that we should be paying H&R Block to do. We should know how to do our taxes because, you know what? We go to work and know how to make money in some form or fashion. We should know how to pay our fair share of taxes so the government can execute the services and needs and goods that we actually need them to do.
Yeah, I mean, the process should be simpler anyway, but yes, I very much agree.
Yeah, it should be a simpler process. If there's somebody at this cafe right now who's, choking on a piece of potato, we should know how to help them. We should know how to do the Heimlich maneuver and do basic first aid. If somebody passes out, hey, you know what? I can do basic CPR until people who are trained medically can come and help this person a bit more than I'm able to do it. Mm-hmm. I'm at a restaurant right now and I've got my food in here in this paper bag, but you know what? At some point, we should all be able to grow our own food. We should learn how to do that. We should know how to reduce our carbon footprint because you know what? We're in the middle of a climate crisis also, and that is probably more of a problem than the COVID-19 pandemic, because we can eventually come up with a vaccine for the COVID-19, and we can go back to some relatively normal schedule of our lives. But what happens when we have irreversible damage to our air supply and our water and our trees, and we clear cut all the forests, and soil erosion takes over, or we build more pipelines and oil spills everywhere, especially in First Nations lands in Canada? What happens?
Exactly.
What happens then?
Yeah. And I just really quickly want to address a comment that came in saying that
Yes.
distance learning allows neurodivergent and others to thrive. Exclusivity in-person learning, or exclusively in-person learning is ableist. And I think that I totally agree. I think that the reality of this conversation, for me at least, and I'm sure that Joe agrees, is that, like, we're not saying take how school exists now and adapt the curriculum. We're saying we need a cultural shift. We need a systemic shift in these institutions in order to be able to allow for people that are neurodivergent to be able to learn in the way they need to learn in order
Correct.
to do whatever they want to do. And so
Correct.
there's a total shift in our understanding of what school is and what learning is and what education is embedded in this conversation that I just wanted to make clear because yeah, I'm all for a radical change in this system that we've built because it's old. It doesn't make sense. We're not all being educated to be factory workers anymore. We're not
Nope.
all, and it's perpetuating these social issues as well that we outlined before,
Correct.
The classism, the racism, the
The
sexism, all of
sexism,
these things,
the
segregation is
ageism.
involved, ageism, all of it.
Hmm.
Ableism, of course. And
All of it.
so, yeah, so I really want to make that clear because in my mind, this is not, let's change the curriculum. This is a radical shift. And I think another aspect of this, when we're outlining all of these things that we should be learning about, is the culture around that, because there is
Perfect. Yes.
there's a cultural implication. And I think because my work is in community, I always go back to sort of this community level understanding, because I definitely think that there is an aspect of education for our young children that needs to be universalized throughout our
I
countries
agree.
or our regions or whatever, because we need mutual understanding. But at the
True.
community level, that's what I would want to see education become, is not you go to school for 8 hours a day because mom and dad have to work for 8 hours a day. It's
Correct.
okay, we're going to use the community resources that we have in order to grow our own food and teach our kids how to do that, because somebody's over there, our neighbor, is growing their own food, and someone else is a medical care professional. That person is going to teach you how to do CPR, or that group
Perfect.
of people.
Perfect.
So,
Perfect.
yeah.
It's all of that. Or you might have an accountant in your neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
Guess what? That accountant's going to teach your community how to have basic financial skills, to learn how to balance a checkbook, and teach you about credit. And not teach you about credit when you're 18 years old and when you can actually sign a contract, but teach you about credit when you're 10 and you're like, oh, you know what? That annual percentage rate is 24.9%. I probably shouldn't sign up for that credit card. Oh, what? Compound interest? Huh? What do you mean? What do you mean it builds every day on top of what your previous balance was? No, I'm not. I don't want to be learning about basic government and the electoral process. How do you get a prime minister in Canada? How do we get a president in the United States? How do we get a governor and a mayor and a city council person and a senator and a House of Representatives member? Basic hygiene. Some kids don't know how to comb their hair or brush their teeth. Some kids don't know how to tie their shoes or iron their clothes or put on a belt. Some parents weren't taught that stuff. So schools should help do that. Schools should teach kids how to cook, especially now that we're in a pandemic and, there are some people who are relying on food banks and a box of groceries. And you got to figure out how to make that box of groceries, that box of fruit and vegetables last for a week. And you've got salad, you've got a bag of lettuce, a bag of spinach, a couple of tomatoes, and a red onion. Go for it. You got to figure that out. Cook it up.
Yeah.
Get to work. How do we deal with our emotions? How do we deal with being angry and upset and disappointed? How do we deal with that? How are we able to process those emotions and communicate them to somebody who can help us deal with them? Because more often than not, we're not taught how to deal with our emotions. We're not taught how to deal with anger. We're not taught how to deal with disappointment and frustration and apathy. We're not taught how to deal with that. So in many instances, some of us get lucky and we figure it out on our own. Some of us rely on self-destructive methods in order to deal with our emotions. We abuse drugs. We abuse alcohol. We overeat. We abuse other people to make ourselves feel better about ourselves. And none of that is healthy. We should have empathy training.
Yeah.
Learn how to be compassionate to other people. Because a lot of people aren't taught that. Some people are just, quite honestly, school in a strange way might teach people how to become sociopaths. Because all we learn is what we're taught to learn, and we're not taught the human aspects of being a human being. We're just taught how to learn. I know how to code. I know how to computer program. I know chemistry. But we're not taught how to feel feelings for other people and how to understand what people are dealing with. We're not taught how to ask good questions. We're not taught how to breathe deeply, how to breathe through our diaphragm, and how to calm ourselves down. We're not taught how to manage stress. We're not taught, quite honestly, the conditions for getting a good night of sleep, so we can get up in the morning and go to school so we can hopefully get the education that we need so we can learn something. We're not taught how to understand our dreams at night. What does it mean when that rose is next to me in the bed? What does it mean when that black cat crosses the path in front of me in my dream? Or why do I keep falling in my dreams and I never stop falling? What does that mean? What does all of this stuff mean? We're never taught how to tell a story, and that goes back to communication. We're never taught how to express our ideas and our feelings and our emotions in a way that's compelling so people will actually want to listen to us. We're not taught any of that. We're just taught, hey, you know what? Write this paper. And hope you only have the right citations. You don't have any spelling mistakes. And you're okay. We're not taught how to give and receive feedback. You think when somebody tells you something, it's an insult and your feelings get hurt. Not everything is an insult. Not everything is an attack on your character or your person. Sometimes, you know what? Somebody that knows something more than you about what you're trying to learn just wants you to learn it, and they want you to know about it because it's important to what they think you should know, and you want to actually learn it yourself.
Listen up, white people who get defensive when they are told they're racist.
Perfect. Bingo. We're not taught the basics of linguistics and the basics of communication. Communication, it's the transfer of meaning and understanding of meaning. We're not taught that. We're not taught how to use the words in our language and somehow communicate those concepts and ideas and those thoughts to somebody else who does not speak our own language. We're not taught basic communication, basic linguistics. We're not taught how to understand nuance. We're not taught how to read between the lines. What's the deeper meaning in all of this? What am I really supposed to be understanding? Because we're taught who, what, when, and where, but we're never taught why. And we're not taught how to understand why. And the why is where you find the nuance. The why is where you read between the lines. And between the lines is that fine print where the information is actually kept. It's that. We're not taught how to love and to care and to share and how to be kind and how to focus and how to eliminate distractions. We're not taught how to give thanks and be thankful and be mindful. We're not taught how to forgive somebody when they screw us over. You know what, man, I forgive you. All right, you were a total asshole, but you know what? Yeah, I forgive you. I won't forget what you did, but I'll forgive you. We can move on. And we can continue to build healthy and happy relationships. We're not taught that. We're not taught how to build healthy and happy relationships. We're not taught how to make somebody feel special. And one of the best ways to make somebody feel special is simply by remembering their name. Remembering their name. Remember where you met somebody. Remember where you saw somebody for the first time. You know what? Yeah. I remember you. I remember I met you at a show in Toronto. Whatever. Just remember it. We're not taught how to move our body in a way that's healthy. We're not taught how to end white supremacy and how to end toxic masculinity and how to end male patriarchy, especially white male patriarchy. We're not taught how to be anti-racist. We're not taught how to be anti-sexist and anti-ageist. We're not taught any of this stuff. It's trial and error. It's part of the reason why we're having these conversations on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah,
we don't agree on everything, but in many instances, people aren't taught how to disagree without being disagreeable. Because just because somebody doesn't think the same way you think or believe the same things you believe, that doesn't necessarily mean that they hate your guts or you hate theirs. We're not taught how to ask good questions. We're not taught how to ask questions that apply to what we are actually learning. We're not taught basic car repair. I shouldn't have to go to Jiffy Lube or Precision Tune to change the oil in my car. I should be able to do that myself. Now, don't ask me to rebuild the engine because that's outside of my expertise. But I should be able to go, oh, yeah, you know what? Let me change my oil. Oh, there's a leak in my ceiling in my house. I should be able to fix my house. Now, no one's asking you to dig a foundation and reframe a wall. No, but if something breaks in your house, you should be taught the basics on how to fix it. You should be taught outdoor safety. You should learn how to pitch a tent. You should learn how to start a fire without a lighter or a fuel source. You should be taught the basics of self-defense. Learn that stuff. That's stuff that we should be teaching our kids.
Yeah.
We should be taught basic fitness. You should be taught how to eat in a healthy fashion. We should be taught how to make a mess and how to clean it up. We should be taught how to grow emotionally as we get older. Because the stuff I'm 44 years old. I've changed from last year. I've changed from when I got married 11 years ago to where I am now. My emotions have changed. My feelings have changed. And we should learn how to evolve as people. We should be taught how to process our emotions. It's okay to do stupid shit, but it's not okay to continually do the same stupid shit over and over and over again. Stop. Evolve. Grow. Learn. Adapt. Something I think everybody should know how to do is how to throw a ball, how to catch a ball, how to kick a ball, how to jump rope. Yeah. So it's all of these things and probably hundreds of ideas that you all can contribute that it's important. It's important, how to potentially start a business. Because not everybody wants to work for somebody else. Sometimes you just want to work for your damn self.
Yeah.
How do you start a business? How do you write a grant? It's all of these things and so much more that I think is going to be so far more beneficial to raising young boys and girls into productive members of a democratic society.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
More,
young folks of
you
any
know,
gender.
yeah, exactly. Thank you, young folks of any gender, because not everything has to be. Hey, you know what? Yeah, I learned about dinosaurs today. So what?
Yeah.
Nobody cares. No, it's not important.
Yeah,
You know,
and that's the thing. You can learn about dinosaurs on your own if you're taught the ways in which to do so and the ways in which to read a book and do research yourself and think critically and you know
exactly.
all of these things are sort of encompassed in just life skills. And I love all the examples that you provided, so thank you for that.
You're
I
very welcome.
I was able to sort of isolate a few of them down into, like, what we're saying is there's practical applications of knowledge that are
Yes.
useful. And those are pretty
Yes.
universal. Those are the things like doing your own taxes, first aid, growing your own food, reading, writing, etc. And
Hmm.
then there's physical health knowledge, there's
Yes.
intellectual development, and then there's
Yes.
emotional intelligence. And these
Emotional
are
intelligence
all
is so important.
so important, and we're not necessarily taught these things.
Nope.
And then we grow up into being adults and we don't know how to deal with relationships in whatever capacity or conflict in whatever capacity that it comes up. And so we need to be taught these coping mechanisms or adaptability or whatever else. You outlined so many examples, so lovely, or
Thank you.
so well.
Thank you. Thank you.
um, yeah,
Conflict resolution is another one. That's such a
yeah.
brilliant one, and I'm annoyed at myself that I didn't think of that. And I know we got about a minute or two left. Um, and in Dr. Doherty's book, he talks about reparations through an arc of acknowledgement, redress, and closure. That concept of arc, acknowledgement, redress, and closure, that can absolutely be the foundation for conflict resolution. Because, hey, you know what? Yeah, I fucked up. Okay, how can I fix it? Okay, once we fixed it, can we move on? Acknowledgement, redress, closure. That's the fundamentals of conflict resolution. You should be taught how to do that. Because, again, not everybody's going to agree about everything. Yep.
Yeah, no, I
Catherine,
totally agree. This
yeah,
conversation could go on forever, but yeah,
it
we only
could,
have
but
2 minutes left.
we got about 2 minutes left. And I know I want to take about 30 seconds to discuss. I know I talk about books. We talk about books. Again, this book, Color of Money, Black Banks and the Racial Wealth Gap, if you can find it, read it. This book, Black Labor, White Wealth, get it. And of course, the granddaddy of them all, the grandmommy of them all, the big one, this one, When Affirmative Action Was White, by Dr. Ira Katznelson. Read it. You need it in your life. Miss Wells, thank you again. What are we talking about next week?
Oh my goodness, thank you so much. This was
You're very welcome.
so great. And yeah, we have so much more to say, but next week I think we're going to talk about being an accountability partner and
Oh,
what that
boy.
means. Because you, my friend, are one of my accountability partners.
Absolutely.
And so I think we need to talk about it. Let's talk about what that means, how it comes about, what we do in order to maintain that relationship and maintain that accountability. Because, like you said just a few minutes ago, we don't always agree on everything. So,
No, we don't.
yeah.
No, we don't. But we need to be better to ourselves and to each other. And being an accountability partner is the best way to do that. So we're going to talk about that. And we're going to have some concrete plans and steps to make sure that we can be the best accountability partners for ourselves and each other.
Yes,
as we go forward.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Awesome.
Yes,
Well, we
ma'am.
still have about a minute, so I just want to thank you again from the bottom of my heart. It's always
Likewise.
such a great experience doing these lives
Thank you
with
very
you.
much.
And
Likewise.
we both,
Thank you very much.
yeah, of course. We also want to remind everybody to reach out if they want to.
Exactly.
You know, we do this because we care.
Absolutely.
You know, if you like what you have been hearing, if you don't like what you've been hearing, let us know.
Exactly. Sharing is caring. And again, if you reach out, we reach back. It's that simple. One call does it all.
Exactly. Exactly.
Woo! All right. Catherine, I got to go. I got to take a little girl to gymnastics practice.
Oh my goodness. Thank you for this, and enjoy your time with your daughter.
Absolutely. And she says hi, by the way.
Oh, hello.
She says hi.
Hello.
Yeah, we might do another video later on. We'll see. But